advancing this very important project to educate the FDA. And that is the segue to the first slide. As you see, the very purpose of this meeting is to continue our long-standing concerted effort to educate the Food and Drug Administration, beginning with the knowledge that these people at the FDA know and love us. They have become genuinely members of the FA community, I even go so far as to say they're members of the FA family. They definitely want this to work for us. They know how much they want to learn and need to learn from you about FA. And as you see there on the slide, they want to know from you what it's like to live with FA every day, what your concerns are as the disease progresses in your life, how you currently manage your FA, what meaningful treatments might look like to you. You know, if you had to pick out a treatment for a single symptom, for example, what would that symptom be, and what would that treatment do for you? And also your thoughts and experiences related to clinical trials. All that so as to make sure that the FDA understands the severity of FA and the real urgency that you and we all feel to treat and cure this disease. And that urgency is based on the very fact that we have nothing but unmet medical need. We don't have any approved treatments. They need to know, therefore, that it's a severe condition that has no current approved treatments. We're urgently seeking those first approved treatments. And to get to those, the FDA needs to understand what the potential benefits are that we so urgently seek, and therefore, too, from you, what risks you might be willing to tolerate to get to those treatments. So once again, just to summarize, these people are in our family, on our side. They want to hear from you the things that they will need to make sound judgments promptly when they review our clinical trial submissions, when they review our clinical trial data eventually. So on to the next slide. So if you're asking yourself, why am I on this call and why am I interested in participating in the June 2nd meeting, whether at home, online, or in person in College Park, Maryland, the answers are right before you there. This is your opportunity to have your voice heard. And it's very important that your voice is heard. And I'll tell you how often we now at FARA are hearing back from the FDA that when we submit a clinical trial protocol and we identify clinical outcome measures or clinical endpoints that will show that the drug is working or not working, they come back and say, well, what do these endpoints have to do with improving the quality of life of your patients and improving their ability to perform activities of daily living? So that's what's so important about this meeting, is that you'll be able to tell them what's important to you in your daily and your activities of daily living, and what's important to you in form of benefits that will improve your quality of life. So you have to keep in mind that the FDA is going to have to rule on every single submission for a clinical trial, for consenting to for us conducting a clinical trial, and every submission of clinical trial data for review for approval. And the knowledge they gain from you on June 2nd, whether you're at home online or there in the room in College Park, will impact their decision making. They know that. They want to know enough about FA that they are confident they will make the right decisions when they look at these submissions for clinical trials and applications for new drug approvals, therefore getting us treatments faster and better. So, and why now? Why in 2017 are we so focused on the patient's voice? Well, it's because historically that voice has been absent. until the very end of the process, basically until after approval. Well, maybe it's in a phase 3 clinical trial when patients are not agreeing to participate in the trial, and the FDA and the sponsors want to know why. Maybe it's after we've gotten an approval and they want to know how the patients are doing. Maybe it's because the drug was approved, but it was using endpoints that weren't very meaningful to you. Maybe they didn't really have anything to do with your activities of daily life or the quality of your life, and they want to hear from you what treatments might address those issues. Or a clinical trial, as I said, was failing, and they want to know why. So the big change is we and the FDA are all interested in making sure your voice is heard from the very beginning to the very end of the whole drug research and development process, throughout that process. That way we'll better instruct even the basic scientists that are doing the basic research, and then the translational scientists and the clinical scientists that are conducting the clinical trials. They'll know why they're doing it, for whom they're doing it, and why this trial design should work. So. Also, an important element of the timing, for now being important, was in 2012. It's hard to believe that 2012 was 5 years ago, isn't it? There was a piece of legislation called the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, FDAs. And in that act, we worked very hard with the FDA before the Congress passed it so that the content of that law would be supportive of faster drug development for FA and all other diseases. And what they did is they added some programs for developing and reviewing drugs more quickly and more solidly. They added things like fast track status, breakthrough therapy designation, accelerated approvals, and so forth, all designed to accelerate the process of developing, reviewing, and approving drugs for FA and other diseases. In doing so, they recognized how valuable it would be to have patient input through the entire drug process, not just at the end, but right at the beginning with basic science projects and so forth, all the way through the clinical trials, and all the way through their review and approval. And they knew that they would have to engage patients beginning in 2012, and they set about doing that right away. They first established a 5-year program and called it the Patient-Focused Drug Development Program to learn about as many diseases as they possibly could, the way they're doing for us on June 2nd. So what they did is they identified first just 20 disorders that they were going to deal with in that 5-year period. They knew, we all know that 20 diseases doesn't even begin to scratch the surface. So they knew that wouldn't go far enough or fast enough. So what they did on their own initiative, without being prodded by anybody, especially the Congress, they decided to extend that program well beyond the 20 diseases. They knew they wouldn't have the people or the time to do the same sort of meeting on their own campus that they would staff, that they would organize, that they would fund for thousands of diseases, which is what they need. So they came up with this new program. It's called the Externally Led Patient-Focused Drug Development Program. And that's where the June 2nd meeting fits in. So what we'll be doing, which is what they authorized, was, FARA and the FA community, along with the MDA and NAF and the Cure FA Foundation, are working very hard together with the FDA to organize and implement this June 2nd meeting near the FDAs, not on the FDA campus, but near enough to the FDA that FDA personnel can get there. And we've invited, I think Jane Martindale will be covering that a little bit later. I'll just say the invitation list is lengthy, and the responses have been really encouraging. So we'll have a good number of people from the FDA that are members of our family with us on June 2nd to implement this program. Meeting logistics are there before you now. Who will be there, either online or in person, or the FA patients and caregivers. It'll be June 2nd between 8 and 12:30 at the College Park Marriott Hotel and Conference Center in Hyattsville, Maryland. We've been out there. It's a beautiful facility, very accessible, huge rooms, very nicely appointed, very comfortable spaces, large areas for, a lot of, connecting and visiting outside in the lobby, and really a comfortable space and a very comfortable hotel. And how will you participate? As I said, either in person there in College Park or online via a live webcast. And the meeting will be videotaped and recorded. I want to emphasize now, though, that if you decide to do it online, these are equally important ways to participate. And online means live participation. It's not like you're just going to be listening and watching. You're going to be participating, and Jane will explain to you how later. And your responses and your input will be equally recorded in the report that we will all be crafting following this meeting. Also following the meeting, after we'll do a short lunch beginning at 12:30, and beginning at 1:30 and going till 3, we'll have a research update for anyone who's interested in either staying or watching online. So at this point, I think I will turn the next slide and the remainder of the presentation over to Jane Martindale, and at the end, Jane and I will team up to answer your questions and give a summary. So, thank you very much again for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Ron, and to reiterate, thank you all for being here and getting engaged in this process. It's, to me, a really exciting thing that we're getting involved with here. As Ron said, this is really our opportunity to tell the FDA what it's like to be a Friedreich's patient, what your lives are like, what symptoms you have, and how it affects your daily lives. So it's a really exciting meeting. I'm going to be talking through a number of things. I'm going to start off with some background on the FDA and drug development. I think seeing some of the names on the list, I think this is old hat for some of you. For some of you, this may be new information. But just to give you some background and context to why the FDA needs to and wants to know some of this information. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the FDA's focus on patient-focused drug development, and then I'll talk about the meeting. And we should have plenty of time for discussion and questions afterwards. As Felicia mentioned earlier, if a question comes to you, feel free to type it into the chat box at any time. We'll answer them at the end, but don't hold off on asking the questions. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, and we'll go straight on to the background. So drug development and clinical trials is a fairly long process. I think we all wish we could make it faster. Many of us are working hard at ways of trying to make this process faster. The FDA is involved all the way through, really, from discovery, which is that blue box on the far left of the screen, all the way up until we have an approved therapy. But in green on the top, there are 2 boxes, one labeled IND, or Investigational New Drug Approval, and one labeled NDA, or New Drug Application Approval. And those are the 2 key decision points that the FDA has to make for a drug to be developed. The IND is when they say, yep, you have enough information to suggest your drug may have an effect in humans, and there's enough preliminary safety data that we think it's a reasonable risk to put it into humans. So that's the beginning of clinical trials. Then the NDA approval at the other end of the spectrum is when all that data has been gathered through clinical trials, and that's when the FDA goes through all the data and says, yep, we believe that the risk-benefit profile is such that we should be allowing this drug to be on the market. Then underneath in yellow, you can see they don't just drop the ball in between and say, off you go, company, go and develop your drug. There's a whole series of meetings that companies or drug developers have with the FDA where the FDA offers advice, suggestions, tells them, no, maybe you shouldn't consider that trial design. We think this would be a better way of doing it to get the data we think you need to demonstrate that your drug works. So they're very hands-on, and probably even more hands-on in the rare disease space. for a disease like Friedreich's, they are very willing to help, and they have a lot of meetings with our companies talking about how you can do a trial in such a way that a drug could be approved. So they're very hands-on. As Ron said, they're our partners in this, which even outside these formal meetings involved that are associated with approval of a specific drug. Farah and the Friedreich's community has met with the FDA, I don't know how many times, to talk about endpoints and biomarkers and other things to speed up this process. They're our partners, and our job as a community is to give them everything they need so they can make those decisions as quickly as possible. Next slide. So drug discovery, that first blue box on the left of the previous slide, is the big, long process that people do in labs all around the world, and we're lucky that we have a really good research community in the Friedreich space. They identify and test thousands of molecular compounds in the lab to try and find a promising compound, and once they've found one, they then move into the formal process of drug development. Next slide. So they move into what's called preclinical development, which as a scientist I always say is the boring science, but it's absolutely essential. It's when they figure out how they can manufacture the drug so it's the same every time. So if one person's not getting a sugar pill while the other one's getting a lethal level of the dose, you need to be able to make sure that every pill or every injection is exactly the same. It involves a lot of safety testing to make sure that there's at least a high probability that the drug will be safe in humans. And there's sufficient evidence that this new compound might be effective against this disease target, Friedreich's in this case. Next slide. That's the point, that first decision point for the FDA. When they say, yep, you've got enough evidence, we think there's a reasonable chance this might work, you may go into human testing. And that's when you move into what's called a phase 1 trial. Phase 1 trials are very small. It says on the slide they're usually healthy human volunteers. That's true in many diseases. For certain types of compounds like gene therapies, and in very serious diseases, it sometimes moves straight into patient populations. This is a small trial. It's really about finding a dose and looking at drug safety. It's not so much about seeing if it has an effect. And this is dabbling your toes into testing in humans. Does it look like there's a chance it can work? Next slide. If you could pass through phase 1, which a lot of compounds do, you get into phase 2. And phase 2 trials are probably the most important ones in a disease like Friedreich's because they usually involve quite a lot more patient volunteers. It says on the slide 100 to 300 patients. That would be a very large phase 2 trial in Friedreich's. We often will use much lower numbers simply because we don't have that many patients. But this is where you really start looking at effectiveness. Does the drug do what you think it's going to do? It's usually involved with placebo arms, so some patients wouldn't be on drugs, so you can see the difference. And you're really looking at how the organism affects the drug, how the drug affects the organism, how much drug is getting where it needs to be, and you're looking at effectiveness and safety. Next slide. If you're successful in your phase 2, you'd move into a phase 3. Now, in traditional drug development, that's over 1,000 patients, often up to 3,000 patients. Now, you're all on mute, so I can't hear you laughing at that. Obviously, we do not have that many patients to put into any single drug trial in this disease. So typically, we don't do what is considered a standard phase 3. We would do a smaller phase 3 or a phase 2B, which would involve far fewer patients. But again, this is where you really are trying to prove effectiveness. Ron mentioned earlier that the FDA has a number of approaches for expediting development and review of drug candidates, and in rare diseases, we will often look at using those pathways to get that definitive proof without having to find 1,000 patients to put into a trial. But this is really about proving effectiveness at this point. Next slide. If you get through all of that and your data looks good, you apply to the FDA with what's called a new drug application. This application is a huge document. It includes all the animal data, all the human data, all the raw data, not just the conclusions, and it allows the FDA to begin the review process. They have a meeting with the company, they look for any missing data, the company is allowed to fill in any missing data, they start talking about what analysis was done, and they either say, you need more work, go back and apply again, or we hope they say, this is great, we're going to go into full review. Next slide. If the NDA is complete, which we hope it is, if you've been listening to the advice from FDA all the way through and getting good data, it should be complete. The review team is assigned. People at FDA have 6 to 10 months to decide whether to approve the drug or not. And that sounds like a really long time, They do it as fast as they can. It takes a long time, so they take all the analyses back to the raw data, reanalyze it, recrunch it, and try and determine absolutely if the drug is effective for its proposed use or not. And also, very importantly, whether benefits outweigh risks, because as I think we all know, many medications have side effects, but if they're going to have a profound effect on disease, we're probably okay with some side effects. They also have to make sure that all the manufacturing methods are appropriate so that every pill or every injection is exactly the same when it's being produced commercially. And this is a long process. It's a very detailed process, but it's a really good process. And if there's any doubt at the end of this process, they will ask for what's called an advisory committee to be pulled together. And that's one of the really important times when they ask for patient input. And I've been through a number of these, and patient input at this stage can make a big difference on whether the FDA decides to approve a drug or not. Some drugs are so clearly good they don't need an AdCom. That's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But if we ever get to this point with a Friedreich's drug where they're questioning is it effective or not, patient input has a profound effect. That's an occasion where the patients can say directly to the FDA, look, this treatment, the benefits are relevant to me. I think you should approve it. So I'm putting that out there. We're not at this point right now, but I hope at some point we will be, or better still, will be approved without one of these meetings. Next slide. And really what we're doing with this meeting that we're talking about today is we're going to be trying to preempt some of that AdCom discussion to let them know in advance what's relevant to us, the patient population. And let's just say everything's good, we get approved, our NDA is approved, our drug is allowed on the market. The FDA doesn't stop there. Obviously, clinical trials tend to be a year, maybe 2 years at the outside. We're hoping a really effective drug may be taken by patients for the rest of their lives. So the FDA will continue to monitor the drug, monitor for side effects, make sure if there are any side effects or concerns they're on the drug's label so that they can be monitored and doctors can keep an eye out for those concerns. So the FDA doesn't drop the ball as soon as the drug is approved. They keep monitoring it from then on. Next slide. So that's the Drug Development 101. Very briefly, what does FDA do and what does it not do? Most importantly, FDA doesn't develop drugs. That's up to the researchers, the pharmaceutical companies, and the non-profit groups like FARA. We're the ones who support and develop drugs. FDA doesn't do clinical trials either. They're not on site for the trials, they don't design the trials, but researchers conducting trials must seek FDA approval before beginning, and FDA will often offer advice as to how that trial should be done in order to get to an endpoint that they could approve a drug on. And I have seen situations where companies haven't listened to the advice of FDA, and that's not a good idea. Listening to their advice throughout is very valuable. Next slide. FDA does not have the authority to regulate the practice of medicines. Although they approve drugs and they regulate the development and marketing of medical products, doctors are still free to prescribe FDA-approved drugs for other conditions. So that's an example, like I know some of you will be taking heart medications. Those aren't approved for Friedreich's ataxia. They are used because they're known to be effective for heart conditions, and that's okay. Doctors have that right. FDA also does not regulate the price of medicine. This has come up recently in the news where some drugs have been approved for rare diseases which are very expensive. That is not an FDA decision. That's determined by the companies and the insurance companies. Next slide. So what FDA does do, in addition to regulating drug development, is facilitate drug development. This is coming back to the fact that FDA is our partner. FDA's mission includes promoting public health. So in addition to actually regulating drugs, review teams have a lot of knowledge about drug development and clinical trials. They meet with companies, they meet with nonprofits, they meet with academics to make sure that everybody is on the same page. They help design the clinical trials and studies and offer advice. I mentioned that earlier. They provide some technical assistance. These days, they're actually involved with a number of consortia developing biomarkers and endpoints. And certainly at FARA, we had a number of discussions with FDA about various tools to accelerate drug development, all the way from mouse models through to clinical endpoints. And they have a number of new programs to make it easier to have those meetings and those discussions with them. So they really are working with us through this process. Next slide. This is, I think, fairly obvious. FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. They do a lot of things beyond drugs. We're talking about drugs and biologics. Next slide. I could go on about all of this for a lot longer. There's a link there which has a lot of information from FDA on the regulation of medical products and other ways to get involved. These slides, as Felicia said, will be available online. You can come back and grab that link and take a look if you're interested in finding out more. Next slide. Okay, so we've talked about drug development, we've talked about the role of the FDA overall. What is FDA's specific interest in patient-focused drug development? Next slide. So one of the things that has really come up in the past 5 years since FDAsia and now the 21st Century Cures Act have come in is that FDA has been charged to think about benefit risk and to think about drug development from the patient perspective. Now, it's all very well to develop drugs for drug companies to make money. We're actually much more interested as a government agency, that FDA is much more interested in developing drugs that patients want to take and that will improve public health. So they develop this concept where they have to look at the benefit risk assessment of each drug. Obviously, many drugs have side effects. Many drugs, or we hope all drugs, have profound benefits as well. And somewhere along the line, you have to balance those. I'm not going to take a drug to fix my sore toenail that could cause cardiac arrest. But if it's going to cure my cardiac arrest and might give me a sore toenail, I'm probably okay with that. So somewhere in there, for every drug, FDA is trying to balance benefit and risk. Next slide. So amongst many other programs, and there really are a number of other programs the FDA is beginning to pull together just to listen to the voice of the patient. They started these patient-focused drug development meetings as a way to systematically gather information directly from patients about the condition and available treatment options. What they really wanted to do was hear direct from patients, caregivers, families, not filtered through me, not filtered through your clinicians, not filtered through the drug companies, but to hear directly from you what your perspective is on your disease, which will help inform their understanding of how you might see benefit and risk. As somebody without the disease, it's easy to say, oh, I think you'd balance it like this. But having spoken to patients across many disease areas over many years, an external person can't really guess how you may feel about a particular risk or a particular benefit. So that's why they want to hear it directly from you, the disease community. And this patient input is going to help the FDA all the way through drug development as they review each of these drugs, look at the data at each stage to say, yeah, okay, we've heard from the patients. This really is something that's meaningful to them to fix. Or, no, that side effect really wouldn't be something that's acceptable. Maybe you should go back and tweak your drug. So you're providing very valuable information to them to help them assess drugs as they go through that development process. Next slide. So our particular patient-focused meeting, we have a number of panel questions. I'm going to go through those shortly. They come pretty much directly from the FDA benefit risk framework. That's the phrasing they use, the matrix they use to evaluate benefit versus risk for individual drugs. So that's why some of the questions are phrased the way they are. We're looking for very specific information that will help them balance this. We did, however, tailor our agenda and our panel questions slightly for our disease, and the original questions have a lot of information about how do you evaluate one treatment versus another. Well, we'd like to have that problem. We don't particularly, so we emphasize different areas perhaps for our meeting to reflect where Friedreich's ataxia is in the development pipeline. But the most important thing to think about with this meeting is that active patient involvement and participation is key to success of these meetings. They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from Dave Lynch. They want to hear from you, the community. At the end of the meeting, Ron mentioned this already, we're going to produce what's called a Voice of the Patient report. And that is supposed to be the voice of the patient. We'll be recording the testimonies, the comments from the floor. We'll be making sure any written comments come into FARA, and we'll use all of that together, all responses from polls, and we will use that to summarize we'll summarize all that information to create this Voice of the Patient report, which will be supplied to FDA, and it will be used in their considerations when they're looking at drugs for Friedreich's ataxia. It's going to take some time to put that report together. We will want to hear from you all again then. We will want input from all of you before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. but this document is going to be very valuable to FDA and to be honest, to drug development companies to understand what it is that you're experiencing and what is important to you. So hopefully, having gone through all that background information, you're even more excited about participating in the meeting. So I'm going to change track somewhat and talk more about the meeting. We've already seen the slide. Ron already referred to it. You know when the meeting is, where it is, and we hope many of you will be able to join us in DC for that meeting. But if you can't, do join us by webcast. There will be plenty of opportunities to have your voice heard through participating by webcast as well. So let's talk about the agenda a little bit. This is a very broad overview. I'm going to go into the panels in a little bit more detail shortly. We're going to start off with a welcome and some introductory comments from Farah and our advocacy partners. We're also going to have a welcome from Wilson Bryant at the FDA. Now, Wilson is in the biologics division. He actually is a treating physician who has previously treated Friedreich's patients. He is somebody at the FDA who actually does know our disease, and he's been a great partner with Farah in the past. So we're really pleased that he has agreed to open the meeting and make some introductory comments for the FDA. After that, we will pass over to James Valentine. You can see a picture there on the slide. He used to work at FDA and was very instrumental in opening up the original patient-focused drug development meetings, and he's going to serve as our moderator. So he'll give another short introduction and explain to everybody how they can be involved in the polling. We'll gather some very basic demographic data that will be necessary for understanding the latest polling questions, and just warm us up and get us into the topic. We're then going to pause briefly and have a video. Obviously, if we want to hear the voice of the patient, we want to hear the voice of the patient all the way from people who have just been diagnosed all the way through to patients who are no longer with us. And we're going to be producing a short video which will be largely focused on talking to the families of some of those people who may not be able to make it to the meeting themselves, either because they're very progressed or no longer with us. And their testimony is very important because they may not be able to be in the room with us. So we'll have the video, and then we'll move into the panels. There'll be two panels. I'm going to talk about these in more detail. One is going to be about how Friedreich's symptoms affect your life, and the other is about managing symptoms and current and future approaches to treatment. For those panels, we have selected panels of people who will speak. Then we will have some polling where people, both in the room and online, can respond to questions. We'll gather data through those polls. They'll be done in real time. And then we'll have comments from people on the floor. So any one of you will be able to put up your hand, get up and make a comment. We ask that those comments are kept short, succinct, and to the point, because we want to make sure everybody has the option of participating. We want to make sure everybody can have their voice heard. So I really encourage you, if you can be there in person, to make comments from the floor to discuss the topic. That's going to be a hugely important part of getting the picture to the FDA people who are in the room. And then we'll close with some comments from the FDA. We've already had an acceptance from somebody from the FDA who will just close the meeting, summarizing what's been heard, making sure they recognize that they've heard what has been said, that they've been engaged in the discussion. Next slide, please. So what are these discussion questions? I'm going to go through these in some detail, so I'm hoping you're all going to leave this webinar thinking about these questions, thinking about the comments you will make, whether it's because you're a panelist, whether it's because you're going to make a comment from the floor during the meeting, or if you can attend online, you can make these comments by email to Farah. You can make those comments through the chat function on the webinar. However you're taking part in the meeting, you'll be able to provide testimony on these questions. So the first panel is living with Friedreich's ataxia, and the questions we're going to be talking about are, what symptoms impact you the most? So what really changes your life? What affects your daily life the most? How do those things affect your life? Can you give examples of how they affect your life? What is it that really changes your life that, if it was made better, would make a huge difference to you? Then we're going to talk about how your symptoms have changed over time. We all know Friedreich's is progressive, and what's most important to you right now may not be the same thing that's really affecting you later in disease or was really affecting you 20 years ago. And we need the FDA to understand that at different points in disease, different symptoms may be important, things may be getting worse, there may be anxiety about that. How have things changed over time for you? They're very interested in what worries you about your symptoms and progression. Because again, that's affecting your life if you're worrying about it. I can do this now, but what will it be like if I can't do this? Or if I could do this again, how would that change my life? So that, we're very interested in what concerns you the most. And of course, if you could fix any one symptom, what would it be? So that's the first panel, and then we'll move on to the second panel, which is about the current and future approaches to treating Friedreich's. Again, you'll have opportunities to make all these comments, whichever way you wish to attend. Current treatments, how do you manage your symptoms now? We may not have drugs, but I know a lot of people do physical therapy, they have surgery, there are cardiac medications. What are you doing now to manage your symptoms? How well are those working? How well do they improve your ability to do specific activities that are important in your daily life? And it may be that the answers to some of these questions are, well, they don't do a good job at all. But the FDA needs to hear that so they can recognize that if there was a drug that did improve that, it would be really valuable to you. And then finally, what specifically would you like to see in a treatment short of a cure? I think we all want a cure. That goes without saying. We'd love a cure, but what short of that would be meaningful to you? And I'm going to make one point here, because it came up in a discussion I had with somebody a few weeks ago. There's no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. Your answer may be the same as everybody else that's commenting. It may be very different, but because it's asking you about your disease or your family member's disease, there's no right or wrong answer. Say what is important to you. Say what is meaningful to you. What everybody wants to hear is your experience. Next slide. So I think I've already referred to this really, as the format will be that there's a panel first, then there'll be poll-in questions. These will be put up on the screen, and you'll be able to answer by through a text message program or through a website. Either way, you enroll and you'll be able to type into your cell phone A, B, C, D and answer a multi-choice question. So whether you're in the room or not, you'll be able to answer these poll-in questions. And it's really easy. It doesn't charge you for the text messages. We've checked that at least 3 times. So I hope, however you're attending, you will answer those polling questions, because that data will be able to use for the report. And then we'll have this discussion with patients and caregivers in the audience where anyone can stand up and make comments. And the moderator, James Valentine, will be asking questions and keeping that discussion on topic and keeping it moving. Next slide. Tips for effective participation. I hope by now you're all agreed you're all going to be participating one way or another. So what's going to make this a good meeting? Number one, remember that the FDA's role and the purpose of the meeting. That's one of the reasons I went through here talking about what the FDA does and doesn't do. Remember their role and the purpose of the meeting. Think about the questions. We've just gone through them. They're available online. If you go through this presentation again, think about each question. Think what your answer would be and what you would want to say about it. If you have something important to share, relate it to the most appropriate topical panel question and get up and talk. If you're not there in person, put it in the chat box, send me an email and make your point. We want to hear from everybody. The more people we hear from, the better we represent the community and that voice of the patient report. We want to hear from the youngest child and the oldest patient. We want to hear from caregivers. We want to hear from family. We want to hear from the patients themselves. Talk. Let us know what you're thinking. It's fine if you want to reiterate what somebody else has said or to say something completely different. But make sure it's got a personal or unique perspective if you're giving a comment in the room, because we don't want to repeat ourselves too many times. Very importantly, keep your comments concise and focused. We want to hear from many voices. It's an emotional topic. I think we could all talk for hours about our own experiences. Try and keep it concise within 1 minute for each comment so we can hear from lots of people. And again, at the bottom, if you're listening in online, you can put your comments in during the webcast, or you can send them to Farah within 30 days of the meeting, or ahead of the meeting if you like. Next slide. A reminder, participating in the discussion, you can do it in person at the hotel in Hyattsville. You can if you want to register, there's a link. You can also find that on the Farah website. And you can submit comments before, after. My email address is there. If you want to submit comments or ask questions, send me an email. I'm on email all the time. Feel free at any point to send me comments, thoughts, considerations. Next slide. If you have any more questions or need assistance, the webinars are recorded. You can go back. You can share them with your friends. There's information on the FARO website about the conference, how to register, links to the registration sites. If you have questions about participating in the meeting, Katie Schultz is online now. There's her email address. There's also a phone number there for Jamie who can give you information about the hotel. Contact any of us. If you get the wrong person, we'll only forward it to the right person, so feel free to get in touch with any of us. Next slide. We have some limited funds to help cover travel and hotel expenses. We're going to open up applications on the 15th. There's a link there to a form where you can apply for assistance for travel. We will just announce who we can support on the 30th. Because of finances, we've got to limit that to a maximum of $750 per family. By family, we mean the broader sense of the world, which can include non-family caregivers. We have a few caps there on room rates and such like. And most importantly, funds are awarded on a first-come, first-served basis. So if you need support to get to the meeting, go in on the 15th, fill in the form, let us know, and we'll try and help as many people as we can. Next slide. So just to go back in summary, this is our opportunity to be a part of the process. It's our opportunity for many people at the FDA who may have never met a Friedreich's patient to meet a Friedreich's patient, hear what your experience is of the disease. We can have a meaningful impact on trial design and drug development. We've seen this in other diseases where the FDA has interacted with disease communities and got to know what's important. It makes a difference. So our collective voices do need to be heard. They need to be heard now. They need to be heard by the FDA. They need to be heard by the companies designing trials to know what's important to you. So let's make a difference. Do come to the meeting. Do attend online. Do submit comments. We really hope to see you there. And I think that's the last slide. Yes. So thank you very much. I hope I didn't talk too fast. I hope I answered some of your questions about the meeting, and I really hope we see you there. Felicia, do we have any questions in the chat box?
Yep, I'm just transitioning over. Hold on one second, I'll take a look. I know I've got a lot of comments popping up, and I think people were just kind of thinking out loud a little bit and answering some of the questions. But let me just scan through and see if I've got specific questions real quick. And feel free to type in if you have questions. I'm going to scan through right now.
And if you've typed comments or thoughts on the questions in the chat box, we will record those and make sure they're included in the pile of data we gather.
And while Felicia's looking for that, and while you're thinking and typing, let me just offer a quick summary of all that Jane and I have reported to you and solicited from you. First, I think it's clear to all of us that we really want to emphasize the severity of FA and the urgency with which we look at the need to develop effective treatments. Quick story to illustrate that point. When Jen and I went to one of the early pre-IND meetings, the preclinical meetings with the FDA, and we got to the point of talking about benefit-risk evaluation and how much risk our patients could tolerate to get to their first treatment. One of the reviewers in that division actually said to us, well, why are we talking about risk at all? These patients do not get very sick. It's not a very severe condition. So why should we put them at any risk? And, you know, most of the faces at my end of the table sort of went blank and blanched. And I stood up and told that reviewer just a little bit about how severe the condition is and how urgent is our need for treatments and how much risk we're willing to tolerate. But you can imagine if that were the attitude of all the reviewers at the FDA, we would never get a drug approved. And now, so that launched a concerted effort in which this meeting on June 2nd is an integral part of educating everybody in the FDA about the urgency and severity of our disease. The other aspect that can illustrate that is, you know, most people in the drug development world say, you know, the FDA reviews and approvals are all about the data. Well, we've heard very important people at the FDA among their senior leadership say, yeah, it sounds great, but at the end of the day, you can't just add up all the data and come up with your decision. At the end of the day, it's a value judgment. We have to look at the benefit-risk evaluation of these patients and decide on the basis of the value of this potential treatment to them. And that's where you really come in on June 2nd, whether you're at home or in the room, is you need to put your voice into helping formulate that value judgment. And it's real, and we've seen the FDA begin to make decisions based on that value judgment that basically overrode the data. So finally, these people have a great deal of respect for you. They know how much you and our FA community have accomplished. They know about the patient registry that you've helped populate. They know about the natural history database that your examinations have fueled. They know about your active participation in clinical research. They definitely know that and hold a great deal of regard for you and what you have accomplished and will continue to accomplish. They want to help. They are in our family. They want to help. They want to learn from you what's the most important way they can help. So I'll hush up at that point and see if Felicia or Jane have come up with questions from you.
Yeah, Ed Ramsey asked me to repost the registration slide, so hopefully you can see that now. Also just wanted to note, we're going to be sharing all this information over social media and emails, and it will be available on the FARA website as well. So this isn't your only opportunity to see it. You'll see it several times in terms of getting registered. We're just asking everybody who's attending in person to register, just so we have a head count where we prepare the room appropriately. There is no charge to attend the meeting. It's just informational purposes. So that registration link is up. I also, we had some feedback from Jamie Lee Hansen had posted. She was kind of thinking a bit about, preparing her comments. So Jamie, I just asked you have some really good thoughts there. If you can summarize some of those for, as Jane said, kind of the 60-second comments from the floor. We'd really love to have you attend the meeting and make some of those comments in person. But I'll also share them with Jane as well. They'll be captured in the background for the meeting. So I'll share your comments with her as well, since she has it for the Voice of the Patient report. I'm just gonna, I might have to stop sharing to go back and see if anybody else has posted. Any other questions?
And Katie Schultz, if you have anything to ask the group or comment to the group, feel free to do that, of course.
Here, Katie, I'll take you off mute.
Okay. Hi.
I just took you off mute.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I was just going to add, if you think you would like to attend the meeting in person, but you're thinking that you need travel support in order to do that, we're suggesting that you can actually book a hotel room now in anticipation of hearing the announcements from the Travel Support Awards, because the hotel has a 24-hour cancellation process. So if you book your hotel now, and for some reason you find that you can't come to the meeting, you can still cancel your room without any penalty. So it might be something that you want to think about in advance if that's something you need to do.
And that hotel information, the link to the website to book under the room block or the phone number to call if you need a specific room type, that's all on curefa.org/conference. And like I said, we'll be promoting that through social media as well, so that link will be readily available. But if you want to go directly to that link after this call, you just go to the conference page, and you can find that information. Okay, somebody asked, how many do you have registered to be in person as of now, and how many do you want or need to show a presence? We are planning for 200 to 250 in the room. As Jen has said, we might give Jamie heart failure if she's the one managing the reservation if we overbook that room, but Jen actually wants that to be a problem we have. So the more the better in person, but we're shooting for 200 to 250 in the room. But we're recognizing that there are people from all over the country that can't necessarily make the trip. It's just as important to show a really big presence online, participation online with people who are answering the polling questions. So if you can't make it in person, don't feel bad about that. And I probably couldn't say how many we have registered now because we've been promoting the webinars and just made that our kind of communication point. We haven't really promoted the registration link. So I know there are people who are coming, who are speaking on the panel that aren't registered yet because we haven't, really beat the drum on that yet. So, question about what social media output are you on? It starts on Facebook. The most comprehensive information is on Facebook, but then we try to share it out with the links on Instagram and Twitter, and those are the main ones. I think we might be on some of the other ones like Google Plus as well, but Twitter, Instagram, but mostly on Facebook, our FARA Facebook page. But anything that's also on FARA Facebook page in abbreviated form, you're going to also see in a long form on the conference page of the FARA website. And you may have received emails about this webinar through the patient registry. We'll probably do another email through the patient registry as well, just to give people all the logistics for how to attend the meeting either in person or where to tune in online, so people can get information. The name to search on Facebook is either FARA or the Full Friedreich's Ataxia Research Alliance. I'll just give it another minute to see if any other questions pop up. These are all good ones.
And others on the phone like Liana or others, that if you have anything to add, please feel free.
Hi, this is Liana from MDA. I don't have anything to add, you guys. We're very comprehensive, so I just would like to, extend my thanks to FARA and the other organizations for leading the charge with this, and to everybody who's participating in the webinar and planning on participating in the meeting. It's really important, and we appreciate your time and sharing your stories.
Thank you, Leon.
All right, I don't see any other notes popping up. If you think of something, if you think of a question after the meeting, feel free to email us. Probably, if you don't remember the email addresses, you can just email info@curefa.org. That'll get to us. Or just you can also contact us through social media or just call the FARA office. I think that's it.
Yeah, I'll just thank everybody on the call for being with us tonight. Thank you too for all that you do on an everyday basis for all of us. This is the FA family that's accomplishing so much together, and that's the way we roll. And so thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for considering participation on June 2nd, either in person on site or in person online. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Jane, for such an excellent job.
Thank you, everyone.
And good night, all.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Bye.
Good night.